Why are you still unhappy? You did what they told you to do. You played by the rules. You stayed disciplined, responsible, focused. You earned the job, built the reputation, maybe even the family. You're not broke. You're not lost in chaos. You're not failing, at least not in any way people can see. And yet, somewhere behind your eyes, there's a heaviness, not the kind that screams, the kind that whispers, a quiet disconnection, a numb ache in the middle of everything, like your life is technically fine, but your soul's been sleepwalking for years. You get through the day, you do what's needed, you smile, but you don't feel it. And the worst part? You can't tell anyone because people would just say you're ungrateful or weak or overthinking it. So instead, you carry the weight silently, like so many other men do. But what if I told you that weight you're carrying, that hollowness you can't quite explain, it's not just personal, it's systemic. We were handed a story from childhood, subtle, repetitive, everywhere. It said, if you work hard, stay in line, earn enough, perform well, you'll be happy. And you believed it. Why wouldn't you? Everyone around you was running the same race. But here's what no one told you. The race was rigged, and the finish line keeps moving. You see, somewhere along the way, happiness became a product, not a state, not a relationship, not a way of being, a product, something to be sold back to you through apps, through lifestyle brands, through podcasts that tell you to grind harder, manifest more, and choose positivity. They convinced you that happiness was a mood, a feeling you could buy, schedule, or biohack your way into. But deep down, you know that's not true, because if it were, you'd be happy by now. So the real question isn't, what's wrong with me? The real question is, what if they gave me the wrong map? Martin Seligman asked the same question, not as a philosopher, not as a guru, as a scientist. He's one of the most respected psychologists of the last century, a former president of the American Psychological Association, the father of a field called positive psychology. But don't let the name fool you. This isn't toxic positivity. This isn't just be grateful nonsense. Seligman didn't invent a shortcut to joy. He exposed the real reasons so many people feel stuck, empty, and quietly lost, even when their life looks good on paper. At one point in his career, Seligman had everything a man could want: tenure, prestige, research grants, international respect. But in the middle of it all, he realized something terrifying. Achievement doesn't guarantee aliveness. You can be winning and still feel like nothing's moving inside you. You can have a full calendar and still feel completely disconnected from your own life. So he went deeper, started asking questions that most people avoid. Questions like, why do so many people feel numb, even when they're not in crisis? Why does the most comfortable generation in history also have the highest rates of depression and suicide? Why does success feel so anticlimactic? And perhaps most importantly, what if the way we define happiness is the problem itself? This wasn't about mood anymore. This was about meaning, about how the modern world conditions us to chase the wrong things and punishes us when we stop running. Because here's the system's dirty secret. It thrives when you're dissatisfied. The economy grows when you feel incomplete. Ad industries flourish when you believe you're lacking. Self-help gurus get rich when you stay confused. Which means your unhappiness isn't a glitch. It's a feature, and that's where Seligman's work hits the nerve. He didn't just point fingers, he didn't rant. He researched for decades with veterans, trauma survivors, CEOs, teenagers, and ordinary people. And what he found was a complete dismantling of the idea that happiness comes from pleasure, comfort, or success. He rebuilt the entire framework from the ground up, and what emerged from that work was not a motivational slogan. It was a system, a new model, rooted in psychology, proven by data, and powerful enough to change how you live. if you're willing to face the truth. This video isn't about fixing you. You're not broken. It's about breaking the illusion. That happiness is something you get at the end of a race. That meaning is a reward. That success is the same thing as fulfillment. It's not. And deep down, you already know that. You felt it on the good days when you hit the milestone, but felt no peace. On the quiet nights when everything was fine, but something still felt off. That feeling has a name. And that question you've been afraid to ask? Seligman already asked it. He studied it. He faced it head on. So now the question becomes, if you're still unhappy, even after doing everything right, maybe it's time to stop blaming yourself. Maybe the system is broken. Maybe the story was false. Maybe the map was wrong. And if that's true, then what does a new map look like? That's exactly what we're going to explore. Let's begin. Here's what they won't admit, but you've already felt. The modern idea of happiness is fake, not flawed, not incomplete. Fake, a carefully packaged illusion sold to you in pieces by brands, by influencers, by your own education. From the moment you were old enough to understand words, you were trained to associate happiness with things: money, status, comfort, entertainment, control. You were told if you work hard enough, grind long enough, stack enough wins, happiness will arrive. Simple formula, straightforward promise, and you believed it, because we all did. But then something strange happened. You got some of it. Not all, but enough. Enough to expect relief, enough to expect peace, enough to think, maybe this is it. And yet, the anxiety didn't go away. The emptiness stayed. In fact, it got louder. The more you achieved, the more you realized, this isn't it. Because what they sold you wasn't happiness. It was sedation, comfort without connection, stimulation without meaning, numbing, not nourishment. A dopamine loop disguised as a life. Look around you. We are the most medicated, most distracted, most overstimulated generation in history. And yet, we are also the loneliest, the most anxious, the most unsure of why we're even here. According to the World Health Organization, 2023, depression is now the leading cause of disability worldwide. Let that sink in. Not cancer, not war, not famine, depression in the age of abundance. That's not a coincidence, that's a consequence of chasing a version of happiness that was never designed to satisfy you, only to keep you moving, consuming, comparing, producing, never pausing long enough to ask why. And here's the real kicker. When this fake version fails you, as it always does, the system doesn't apologize. It doesn't correct itself. It blames you. You didn't hustle hard enough. You weren't grateful enough. You didn't think positive enough. You must be broken. But what if you're not? What if you're functioning exactly as they trained you, in a system that profits when you feel like you're never enough? Martin Seligman saw this early, but his insight didn't start with philosophy. It started with dogs. Let me explain. Back in the 1960s, Seligman ran a series of psychological experiments that would later become one of the most disturbing metaphors for the modern human condition. In the study, dogs were placed in cages where they received mild electric shocks. At first, they tried to escape. They scratched, barked, jumped. But the shocks kept coming. No matter what they did, they couldn't stop the pain. Eventually, they gave up. Lay down, went still. Then something chilling happened. The experimenters opened the cage doors. The dogs were free to leave, but they didn't. They stayed. They had learned that nothing they did made a difference. So even when escape was possible, they didn't even try. Seligman called this learned helplessness. It's when you've been conditioned by failure or futility to believe that your actions don't matter anymore. So you stop acting, you stop resisting, you just survive. Sound familiar? It should. Because most people aren't living, they're enduring. They've stopped asking questions, stopped expecting better. They're just moving through the motions, numb and detached, quietly counting down. Not because they're weak, but because they've been trained. The system you live in doesn't need you dead. It needs you exhausted, passive, obedient, always almost happy, never fully free. That's the sweet spot, where you consume but don't rebel, where you perform but don't reflect, where you smile but don't feel anything real behind it. Seligman's work revealed something terrifying. It's not just trauma that destroys people. It's repetition, it's cycles, it's being taught over and over again that no matter what you do, nothing changes. That your role is not to live, but to adapt. To fit yourself into a system that was never built for your wholeness, only your usefulness. And here's the final piece of the trap. Even the tools you were given to cope, self-help books, productivity hacks, therapy apps, they were built on the same broken foundation. They still define happiness as a reward, a mood, a byproduct of doing the right things. But Seligman knew better, because the real problem isn't just that you're tired or confused or disconnected. The real problem is this: you're using the wrong map. You were taught how to get a job, but not how to build meaning. You were taught how to manage time, but not how to be present. You were taught how to climb ladders, but not how to ask if the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall. They trained you to chase outcomes, not examine values. They taught you how to achieve, but not how to feel, how to compete, but not how to connect. So now you sit there with the life you were supposed to want and wonder why it feels like nothing. That's not failure, that's awakening, and it's the most dangerous thing you can do in a world built on keeping you asleep. Seligman didn't wake up to destroy the system. He woke up to map an exit, to show that there is a different way to live, a different structure, a different definition of fulfillment, not one based on consumption, but on connection, not one rooted in achievement, but in alignment. But to even consider that path, you have to see the illusion for what it is. You are not unhappy because you're broken. You are unhappy because you were handed a map that leads you in circles, and now you're starting to look for a new one. Seligman found it. Let's keep going. So let's say you've woken up. You've looked around and realized that the life you were promised isn't delivering what it said it would. You've seen the illusion. Now what? Martin Seligman asked the same thing. If happiness as we know it is broken, then how do we rebuild it? He didn't turn to motivational quotes or cheap self-help slogans. He went deeper. He built a system, a framework, one that explains what a fulfilled life actually needs and what the modern world systematically ignores. He called it PERMA: positive emotion, engagement, relationships, meaning, accomplishment. Not a checklist, not a quick fix, a blueprint. Let's break it down. First, positive emotion. That does not mean being cheerful all the time. It doesn't mean fake gratitude, forced smiles, or pretending everything is fine. It means having the capacity to feel, to recognize the small good moments, without needing them to be loud or dramatic. Modern society doesn't train us for that. It trains us to chase hits, dopamine, notifications, performance highs, constant novelty. We're overstimulated but emotionally numb. We get pleasure but not peace. We get excitement but not joy. We scroll through 100 images but forget what it's like to sit still and feel something real. Seligman's point is simple. Happiness isn't about non-stop excitement. It's about tuning back in to the parts of life that aren't monetized, to the moments that don't demand an audience. Second, engagement. This is what psychologists call flow. That state where you're so deeply immersed in something, you forget time, you forget yourself. You're not performing, you're not consuming, you're simply present. It's rare, but when it happens, you remember it. The problem? Modern work kills flow. It's replaced by metrics, deadlines, constant tracking, micromanagement. Your attention is sliced into pieces. You're pulled in 10 directions at once. And when your mind is scattered, you lose your ability to drop into anything fully. That's not just inefficient, it's soul-draining. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi found that people who experience flow regularly have double the life satisfaction of those who don't. But flow isn't possible when you're constantly distracted, when your tasks are meaningless, when everything feels monitored. To feel engaged, you need challenge. You need autonomy. You need to feel like what you're doing matters. We've replaced that with meetings. Third, relationships. This one hurts the most because a lot of men were taught to be strong by being alone. You were told connection is weakness, that needing others is failure, that real men handle things themselves. So you got good at being independent. You learned how to carry weight. You learned how to keep it all in. But at what cost? You've got acquaintances, colleagues, followers, but who knows you? Who actually sees you? Seligman made it clear. Without real human connection, no version of happiness lasts. We are relational beings, and yet the culture you live in rewards isolation. Success becomes your identity, not depth, not vulnerability, not belonging. Especially for men in midlife. They're often surrounded but completely alone. No one taught them how to stay open, only how to stay in control. Fourth, meaning. This is the one the system fears most, because meaning can't be bought, it can't be tracked, it can't be turned into data. Meaning happens when you live for something beyond yourself, a cause, a belief, a responsibility, something that anchors you even when things fall apart. But modern life has replaced meaning with productivity. You're told to perform, not to serve, to optimize, not to believe, to grow your brand, not your soul. Religion has faded, community has fractured, sacrifice has become a joke. And the result? A generation of men who feel like machines. Purpose is inconvenient in a world that only values profit. So we drift, we achieve, we accumulate, and still feel hollow. Because nothing you consume will ever substitute for what you were wired to give yourself to. Fifth, accomplishment. Not in the Instagram sense, not in the resume sense. This isn't about external validation. It's about the quiet pride that comes from doing hard things for your own reasons, when no one's watching, when there's no applause, when it doesn't trend. Real accomplishment lives in silence. You set a challenge, you show up, you struggle, you finish. Not because someone told you to, but because you chose it, because it meant something. In a world obsessed with visible success, Seligman brought us back to the kind that actually builds confidence, the kind that builds you. PERMA is not a feel-good acronym, it's a survival strategy. Each piece counters a lie. Positive emotion reminds you to feel in a world that tells you to numb. Engagement reminds you to go deep in a world built on distraction. Relationships remind you to connect in a culture that rewards isolation. Meaning reminds you to serve in a system that worships self-interest. Accomplishment reminds you to build in an age that teaches you to perform. Seligman wasn't selling optimism. He was rebuilding the idea of a good life from the ground up. He didn't ask you to be happy all the time. He asked if your life is built to support happiness at all. Most people's lives aren't. They're built to support function, efficiency, profit, control. So, of course, you feel empty. You're trying to find fulfillment in a system that never included it by design. But here's the hope. If happiness has structure, it can be rebuilt. If it's a system, you can reprogram it. If it's a skill, you can learn it. That's where we're going next. Not just how to feel better, but how to take back the ability to shape what your life feels like at all. The question is, will you choose to build something real or keep chasing something fake? Let's go deeper. So now you know, Happiness isn't a mood, it isn't luck, it's a structure. And like all structures, it can be built, brick by brick, deliberately, intentionally, skillfully. That's the hardest truth to swallow, because if happiness is a skill, then you are no longer a passive victim of your own misery. You are a builder, a designer, a reprogrammer of your own experience, but no one taught you that. The system doesn't want you to know, it prefers you confused, frustrated, trapped in an endless search for relief from problems you were never given the tools to solve. Seligman knew that. That's why he treated happiness like training, not magic, not genetics, training. He showed that the mind can be conditioned toward awareness, toward depth, toward meaning. Just like a muscle, it can be weak from neglect, or it can be strengthened through practice. That means you can learn how to feel again, how to notice again, how to connect when the world has trained you to isolate. It means joy is not something you wait for, it's something you shape. And here's the paradox. You already know how to optimize. You've spent decades learning how to meet expectations, how to be productive, how to push through, but no one ever showed you how to be alive. You were trained to function, not to flourish. You were trained to chase goals, not to understand what any of it was for. That's not your fault. That's the curriculum of a machine culture. From childhood you were graded, scored, ranked, measured, rewarded for compliance, punished for stillness, praised for performance. So you adapted. You built a life that works on paper, but it doesn't feel like yours. This is where everything flips, because now you understand the pain you feel isn't weakness. It's misalignment. It's the dissonance between your design and your environment. And that can change. Seligman proved it could. He didn't just write theory, he applied it. At West Point, he worked directly with the U.S. Army to train soldiers in psychological resilience. Not just toughness, but emotional strength. The ability to rebuild the mind after trauma, to rewire the response to stress, to protect the soul, not just the body, because Seligman understood something most leaders don't. A man trained to fight is still vulnerable if he hasn't been trained to recover. And recovery, like happiness, is not instinctive. It's not automatic. It's a discipline. You don't wait to feel better. You train your attention. You choose your inputs. You build an inner architecture that doesn't collapse under pressure. This is what reprogramming means. Not positive thinking, not affirmations, but conscious design. You look at your environment, your habits, your relationships, your beliefs, and you ask, does this support my wholeness or erode it? Does this make me more awake or more numb? Does this reinforce the lie or help me live the truth? Most people never ask, because questioning the system feels dangerous. But staying in it, while quietly dying inside, is far more dangerous. There is no quick hack, no 5-step formula. There is only this: the willingness to rebuild with intention, to feel more deeply, to connect more honestly, to pursue meaning even when the world tells you not to treat fulfillment not as an outcome, but as a skill. That's how you take your power back. Not by escaping, but by reconstructing your relationship to time, to self, to others, to pain. By training yourself to see clearly where you were taught to look away. By standing in the quiet center of your life and choosing, deliberately, to participate. Not as a machine, not as a pawn, but as a human being who refuses to be managed by systems that never had your well-being in mind. This is the beginning of something entirely different. Not happiness as reward, but happiness as craft. Not a feeling to chase, but a skill to sharpen. And once you realize that, the next question becomes, if you can train it, who's been deciding what you're allowed to practice? And why are they so afraid of you getting good at it? That's where we go next. Now you've seen it, the illusion, the programming, the structure behind your sadness. You've seen the system for what it really is, and what it was never built to give you. So now the mirror turns, not on the world, but on you. The question is no longer, why am I unhappy? You know why. You've been taught to want the wrong things, measure the wrong things, and chase a version of life that leaves your soul untouched. So the real question becomes, what will you do now that you know? Here's the first thing to understand. Success doesn't guarantee happiness. It never did. You can win every round of a game that doesn't matter and still feel like you've lost yourself. Because if your definition of happiness is broken, then every milestone becomes a trap. You climb a ladder, but it's leaned against the wrong wall. You reach the top and realize you never wanted what was waiting there. But by then, you've sacrificed your health, your time, your relationships. For what? Approval, security, a title, a number in an account that no longer means anything? That's the first trap. Confusing visible success with invisible fulfillment. And here's the second lesson. Meaning isn't something you find in a book. It's something you create through action, through how you move, choose, live, and show up. You can talk about purpose all day. You can read, you can journal, you can reflect. But none of it matters until you start living in alignment with it. Every time you show kindness in a culture built on competition, you reclaim meaning. Every time you choose simplicity over performance, you make space for depth. Every time you sit with someone truly present, you restore connection in a world that teaches distraction. These aren't grand gestures, they're small rebellions, daily choices that chip away at the old code and carve out something real, something human. You don't need a spiritual awakening, you need different habits, different reflexes, a different relationship with time, with silence, with presence. The search for meaning doesn't begin with a breakthrough. It begins with participation, with engaging in life as if it matters, even before it proves itself to you. Because if you wait to feel ready, you never start. If you wait to be inspired, you miss the practice that inspiration depends on. And here's the third lesson. You are not broken. You've been misprogrammed by culture, by media, by systems that don't care about your wholeness, only your output. You've been taught to doubt your own needs, to override your signals, to dismiss your fatigue, to fear your sensitivity, to mock your longing. So you learn to perform, to repress, to cope. But what you never learned is that all of it can be unlearned, because your mind isn't fixed. Your habits aren't permanent. Your story isn't locked. You can reprogram the architecture. You can rewrite the definitions. You can remove the weight that never belonged to you in the first place. But don't expect permission. The system won't grant it. Your peers might not understand it, and the old version of you will resist it, because freedom feels like a threat when you've been trained for obedience. And that's why the most dangerous thing you can do in a broken system is learn to be whole. Not louder, not angrier, not faster, just whole, aware, alive, and unwilling to trade your peace for approval ever again. That's not rebellion, that's reclamation. You're not fighting the system, you're stepping out of it. One thought at a time, one action at a time, one quiet decision at a time. And that brings us to the final question, the one Seligman never had to ask directly, because his entire life was the answer. If happiness is a skill, who's been controlling your ability to learn it? Who's been benefiting from your ignorance, your numbness, your exhaustion? And what happens when you finally stop waiting to be taught and start choosing to remember? Because here's the truth. Once you remember, once you reconnect, once you rebuild, no one can unteach that. No one can own you again unless you let them. So ask yourself, are you ready to take it back?